today in Rich in Relationship. We're going to talk about
Understand why you unintentionally hurt the ones you love. How to end self-sabotage in your marriage. Self-sabotage is when we unconsciously step on our partner's emotional landmine, hurting them and ourselves. The reason for this is in our deep emotional programming. Welcome to another episode of Rich in Relationship, and I'm your host, Rich Heller, and today we're talking about marital self-sabotage, hurt, and disconnection. And to some of you, you may be like, wait, what? What are you talking about? What I'm talking about is when you say something to your partner and suddenly they're yelling at you. It happened to me just the other night. I was saying, wow, you didn't read that. And all of a sudden, what I got was, why are you always criticizing me? I didn't even know I was criticizing. I thought I was just stating my point of view. This happens in all marriages, not just mine. Self-sabotage is when we unconsciously step on our partner's emotional landmine, hurting them and ourselves. Have you ever lashed out at your partner or withdrawn from them only to regret it later? These moments of unintentional hurt often feel like an uncontrollable reflex, leaving both partners wounded and disconnected. But what if you could understand why this happens and start breaking the cycle? In this episode, we're going to uncover what are those hidden patterns that lead to self-sabotage, to accidentally hurting or accidentally being hurt in marriage, and why it's driving disconnection in your partnership, like your primary relationship. I know this is true. Well, I'd like to say that you would never deliberately harm your partner. Though honestly, sometimes when we're really angry, even rich, we do deliberately harm our partner. But we know in those moments, that's because we feel out of control. Well, this is kind of what we're talking about. Right now, all rational and sane, you'd never deliberately harm your partner. And yet, sometimes conflict escalates so quickly. Sometimes we go from 0 to 60 and we don't know why. Or sometimes they go from 0 to 60 and we're just defending ourselves. The reason for this is in our deep emotional programming. What do I mean by that, right? It makes it sound like you're just you're like my laptop. Well, in a way, we are like laptops. I mean, computers get this. We created computers, we created AI, and like any good creator, we created it in our own image. The reason why computers are mostly operating system before the apps can run is that there are some things that the computer needs to do automatically in order to communicate with the apps. There's some things that it needs to do automatically in order to function. Our operating system is our unconscious mind, is laid into our unconscious mind. Our unconscious mind helps us breathe. Our unconscious mind helps us walk. Our unconscious mind takes care of a gazillion and one tasks for us so that we don't have to think about it, so that we can focus our conscious mind on identifying the problem at hand, on growing our relationships, on securing our future. Our unconscious mind takes care of all the day-to-day stuff, but it's also in this unconscious mind that there are glitches, right? Just like any operating system, it's not perfect. It's only as perfect as the person who programmed it. Now, who programmed you? I know who programmed me. It was my mom and my dad. Now, and I don't want to lay it all at their doorstep. Oh, you know what? I'd be perfect if it weren't for them. Because the truth is, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for them. The truth is, I wouldn't be doing this podcast if it weren't for them. The truth is, I wouldn't strive to have a loving partnership if it weren't for them. So we can't just sit there and say it's all their fault, but we can get that. The patterns that we're living in our marriage are patterns that we learned in our childhood, mostly from our parents, and they learned it from their parents, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Some of it we learned in our culture. Some of it we learned in schools. Our unconscious mind is basically formed from the age of 0 to 7, and from 7 to 12, it's kind of perfected. 12 to 16, we start to go through a life change, and the operating system needs to change with that. It's a big moment. And then from 16 on, the operating system is 100% laid in. Now, here's the good news and the bad news about our operating system. The good news is its prime directive is our safety and growth. Its prime directive is our happiness and joy. Here's the bad news. It takes direction from our conscious mind, and we don't always intentionally, consciously give direction to our unconscious mind. And sometimes our unconscious mind gets what we call a virus, and our conscious mind can't fix it directly, or maybe our conscious mind doesn't have the tools it needs to fix the virus. So I want you to think about when you go from 0 to 60, or when your partner goes from 0 to 60, basically your operating systems have a virus. That's what we're talking about here. And when we go from 0 to 60, that's when we are most likely to hurt our partner. Or when we say something that steps on a trigger for them, that's when we're most likely to tap something, an old hurt that's unresolved, that's in a virus in their operating system. That's probably the best way to think of it. When your partner forgets something important, do you feel neglected and lash out? Or is it really about an old wound being triggered? Let's go back to last episode. We talked about attachment styles. And I talked to you about how attachment styles are grounded very much in how we're raised. If your attachment style is anxious and your partner says something that taps that anxiety and you react, your reaction is a form of self-sabotage. Your anxious reaction is a form of self-sabotage, a sabotage in the marriage. Now, you could say that they're tapping your anxiety is also a form of sabotage, and it might be. The whole concept that I'm trying to lay down here, the tracks that I'm laying down for your train, is that 95% of the fights that you're having with your partner are your problem. Absorb that one. That's why here at Rich in Relationship, a lot of the work we do is about helping people rewire their unconscious mind so that that doesn't happen anymore. Have you ever found yourself in the same argument thinking, why are we here again? It's no accident. It's a predictable pattern of unresolved emotional triggers. Fights, the silent treatment, ignoring one another, avoiding conflict. These are all signs of glitches in our unconscious mind or operating system. Emotional exhaustion, fear of conflict come from glitches in our operating system. The way to move through this is to begin to identify the glitches, or what therapists like to call triggers or buttons. For some people, criticism is a glitch, a trigger. For other people, criticism just rolls off their shoulder. For some people, other people's anger is a big trigger and causes them to react. For other people, anger is just part of their environment. You want to identify what are the things that have you going from 0 to 60. Don't worry about your partner right now. If you're worried about your partner, give them this podcast to listen to. Let them kind of educate themselves. Remember, we can't fix them. We can work on our own operating system. We can only help them if they ask us to. Many men are trying to help their female partners without being asked. And that is perceived as manipulation. It is perceived as trying to get them to do something they don't want to do. Just get, men, that you, under no circumstances, should be helping your wife unless she gives you permission. That's a whole nother podcast episode. So we want to identify our triggers, because our triggers are the glitches. Our triggers are the problems in our software that need to be addressed. And we can identify them by noticing where we go from 0 to 60. You might want to start keeping a trigger journal or some kind of record of where you're going from 0 to 60. Keep it on your phone, keep it in a notebook. That's the first step. The second step is to notice when those triggers come up, what triggers them, what are the remarks. The third step is when those triggers come up to learn to de-escalate that trigger so that you're not acting on it. The fourth step is to actually remove the trigger. Do you ever feel like the victim in your marriage, asking yourself, why is this happening to me? That mindset may actually keep you stuck right? If you feel like they're making you feel things, if you feel like they're doing it to you, there may be something abusive happening there. I'm not discounting that. But when you live in why is this happening to me? When you live in the role of victim, there's no moving out. That role is I've already lost, so why even try? There's a difference between having the experience of being a victim. Somebody punches you, you definitely feel like a victim. Somebody steals from you, you feel like a victim. Somebody cheats on you, you feel like a victim. Somebody doesn't keep a promise or breaks trust, you feel like a victim. There's a difference between having those feelings and then returning to a mindset of I can move through this. I will move through this. I will learn from this so that it doesn't happen again. Self-sabotage thrives in the environment of blame and deflection. Blame and deflection are covers. Blame and deflection are actually glitches in your programming, right? The only thing that works is personal accountability and introspection. When we have mastery of ourselves, we won't allow them to hit us. When we have mastery of ourselves, we won't allow them to steal from us. When we have mastery of ourselves, we will not allow abuse. Reflect on the moments where you felt like a victim and ask, what role did I play in this situation? So a stance that I give my client is called the stance of accountability. And it goes like this. You pretend that you are God teaching yourself a lesson. And you pretend that you chose to be in that situation, no matter what it was. You chose to have them cheat on you so that you could learn a lesson. What was the lesson? And the lesson is never just about them. It's always about you. What is it that I need to learn so that this does not happen again with anyone, right? When you take the stance of accountability, I completely own that I created the situation, which is not necessarily true, right? But it's a mindset. When you take the stance of accountability, I take responsibility for creating the situation. You can then identify the behaviors that contributed to the situation accidentally or on purpose, and you can change them and reduce the possibility that's going to happen again. You can begin to create healthy boundaries. You can stop shutting down and start setting up healthy boundaries. What if breaking free of a destructive pattern was simpler than you thought? Right? I'm talking to you about, oh, your unconscious mind. It's programming. Listen, we update the operating system in our computers all the time. What if you could update the operating system of your mind? It starts with awareness and small shifts in behavior. The awareness is to help us identify what is it that needs to be reset. When we reset, we can start to emotionally self-regulate. Self-regulation in itself will not change the programming, but it will change our behavior. Our first goal is to behave in a way that it represents our true values. Our first goal is to behave no matter what emotions we have. If we feel like murdering someone, do we murder them? I sure hope not. If we're really upset with our partner, we want to change our behavior so that we're not dumping, blaming, resenting them, not to their face. We want to take it somewhere else. We want to change our behaviors with our partner so that everything that happens in the space with our partner is as safe as possible. And we want to reprogram that stuff too. First, behavioral change will stop the actual self-sabotage. But without addressing the emotional roots, there will never be true safety. Your partner will always know that you are struggling in some way. Your partner will always feel that it may not be completely safe. Ultimately, self-sabotage is about releasing past hurts. Ultimately, self-sabotage is about letting go of old assumptions and ideas that no longer work for you, that maybe worked in your childhood or worked in school or worked in your adolescence, but don't work here. Next episode, we're going to be talking more about releasing hurts and rebuilding trust. So get it. Self-sabotage is an unconscious survival mechanism. It's programming that used to work that doesn't work now. And it doesn't work now because it's damaging our connection. It's driving disconnection instead of partnership and intimacy is really what we're looking for, isn't it? Recognize that these patterns are destructive, and by identifying them and noting them, you can begin to alter how you behave when they come up so that your behavior begins to create safety. And stay tuned for the next episode where we learn how to let go of past hurts and rebuild intimacy. If you're ready to break the cycle and rediscover reconnection in your marriage, like this podcast, subscribe to it, share it with your friends. Help us to continue to deliver education and uplifting marriages around the world. In the meantime, have a wonderful day and an awesome tomorrow.